Writing. The rain came down so hard that night it erased the road ahead, turning the world into nothing more than streaks of gray and reflections in the headlights. I almost drove past her. Just one more second, one more blink, and I would never have known she was standing there on the shoulder of the highway, soaked from head to toe, clutching a baby so tightly that it looked as though she believed her arms alone could protect that tiny life from the storm. She never waved. She never begged. She simply stood there with the look of someone who had run out of every other option. When I rolled down the window, all she whispered was, "I just need somewhere to go." In that single sentence, I heard more pain than I had heard in years. If you believe kindness can change someone's life and that everyone deserves a second chance, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories of hope and compassion alive. I had spent most of my life believing that helping strangers was simply the right thing to do, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't afraid that night. Every warning I'd ever heard about picking up strangers echoed through my mind. Yet there was something about the baby's tiny blanket, already soaked through, and the exhausted expression on the woman's face that silenced every fear. She looked less like someone dangerous and more like someone who had been carrying the weight of the world alone for far too long. I unlocked the passenger door, turned the heater to its highest setting, and continued driving without asking too many questions. The silence inside the truck felt almost sacred. The baby, who couldn't have been more than 6 months old, had stopped crying as the warmth slowly filled the cab. The woman stared out the window as raindrops raced each other across the glass. She looked younger than I first thought, perhaps in her late 20s, but exhaustion had added years to her face. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, bruises she tried to hide beneath damp hair, and a sadness that seemed too heavy for anyone to carry. She thanked me quietly, but beyond that she offered nothing. I realized she wasn't refusing to talk because she didn't trust me. She simply didn't have the strength left to explain how life had brought her to this moment. I took them to the only place I knew they would be safe, my late parents' small farmhouse just outside town. After my father passed away, I couldn't bear to sell it. Most days it sat empty except for occasional visits to keep it clean. That night it became something entirely different. I found dry blankets, warmed a bottle for the baby, and started a fire in the old stone fireplace. As the flames slowly filled the room with light, the little girl finally smiled for the first time. It was such a tiny smile, but somehow it pushed back the darkness that had followed all of us inside. The next morning the rain had stopped, but the storm inside that young mother's heart remained. She introduced herself as Emma and told me her daughter's name was Lily. Little by little, pieces of her story emerged. She had left an abusive relationship after years of believing things would get better. Every promise had turned into another lie. Every apology had become another excuse. She had finally gathered the courage to leave with nothing but a diaper bag, a few dollars, and hope that somewhere there was a safer future waiting for her child. Unfortunately, hope alone couldn't pay for food or shelter. By the time I found her, she had been turned away from every place she thought might help. Listening to her story changed something inside me. I had spent years grieving my own losses. My wife had died from illness nearly 5 years earlier, and ever since then I had buried myself in work, convincing myself that staying busy was the same as living. The farmhouse had become a museum of happier times instead of a home. But now, hearing a baby's laughter echo through those quiet rooms, I realized how empty my own life had become. Sometimes helping someone else quietly heals the broken places inside ourselves. Over the following weeks, Emma refused to accept charity without contributing. She cleaned the farmhouse, planted flowers outside, cooked meals, and somehow filled every corner of that old place with warmth. Lily learned to crawl across the worn wooden floors while I found myself smiling more often than I had in years. Neighbors who had barely spoken to me before began stopping by with baby clothes, homemade meals, and job leads for Emma. What started as one act of kindness slowly spread through the entire community. People who had never met her wanted to help simply because they saw someone trying her hardest not to give up. Still, healing is never a straight path. One afternoon a black SUV pulled into the driveway. Emma's face turned pale before I even understood why. The man who stepped out wasn't shouting or making threats. Instead, he wore a calm smile that somehow felt even more frightening. He claimed he only wanted to see his daughter and promised he had changed. But I noticed the way Emma instinctively stepped backward while holding Lily close. Fear like that doesn't disappear overnight, and it doesn't lie. I contacted the local authorities while Emma reached out to an advocacy organization that helped survivors rebuild their lives. With proper legal support and documented evidence of past abuse, she found the courage to stand firm. It wasn't easy. Court hearings, paperwork, sleepless nights, and constant anxiety nearly overwhelmed her. Yet every time she looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, she remembered why she had walked into that rain instead of staying where she had been. She wasn't running away anymore. She was running toward a better future. Months passed, and life slowly began to feel normal. Emma found work at a local bakery whose owner admired her determination. Lily became the unofficial mascot, charming every customer with her bright smile whenever Emma brought her in after daycare. The farmhouse no longer felt borrowed. It felt alive. Laughter replaced silence. Fresh bread replaced dust. Hope replaced fear. I realized that the greatest gift I had offered that rainy night wasn't a ride or a roof. It was simply believing someone when they said they needed somewhere to go. Then came the day Emma received the keys to a small apartment of her own. It wasn't fancy. The walls needed paint, and the furniture came from donations, but to her it looked like a palace. Watching her carry Lily through that front door reminded me that home has never been about expensive things. Home is the place where fear no longer follows you inside. Before leaving, she hugged me with tears in her eyes, thanking me for seeing a human being instead of a burden. The truth was that she had rescued me just as much as I had rescued her. She had reminded me that grief doesn't end by hiding from the world. It begins to heal when we open our hearts again. Before we reach the end of this story, I have one special request. Please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and share one small act of kindness you've experienced or offered. Your story might give hope to someone who desperately needs it today. Nearly a year later, another storm rolled across town. As rain tapped against my windows, there was a knock at the farmhouse door. Standing there were Emma and little Lily, now happily walking while holding a tiny bouquet of wildflowers. They hadn't come because they needed shelter anymore. They had come because they wanted to visit family. In that moment, I understood that the smallest decisions can create the biggest miracles. If I had driven by that night, 3 lives would have remained broken in different ways. Instead, one choice made in the middle of a storm became the beginning of healing for all of us. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a heartfelt comment, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories that remind us humanity is still alive. You never know whose life your kindness, or even your support for stories like this, might change. Sometimes the greatest heroes never wear uniforms or make headlines. Sometimes they are simply ordinary people who stop their car in the rain, open a door, and give another human being the one thing they have almost stopped believing exists, a safe place to begin again. If you'd like, I can also create the matching YouTube description, hashtags, search tags, disclaimer, and click-worthy thumbnail title for this story.